learning thing that was huge.
Well, let's actually. Are you okay? Can we, the three of us, just sort of talk about that?
Yeah.
Is it on?
So it's on. I started the broadcast.
Oh, yep.
So let's actually. Are you? There we go. Thanks. So let's get started and just kind of point out to anyone who's watching. Thanks for watching. That it's just a small group, small conference, and so it's just a couple of us, but we got Jen who's interested in watching. So we might change the whole structure of this. Might change more into like an interview or something. Is that okay, Jen?
Yeah. I really am interested to hear what you guys are doing and like how that's.
So I'm even
I'm
gonna.
interested about
I'm even going
thing that started from
to.
the Crucible. It's super cool. Sometimes that happens in classrooms. The weirdest things will a conversation like that.
And it's interesting too because this is my first year in that district, and I'm the only one that's teaching my particular content area. Like I'm the only 10th grade honors teacher, so there's a bit of freedom in the way I can just be like, oh, I don't know what was done, so the door's kind of wide open.
Yeah, you can't. No one else did this before. I get to start what I want to do.
Exactly. So there's a little bit of freedom to take some of the risks and to go. I don't know where this is going to lead.
Yeah.
But I know that I need to follow this because if I had tried to go and stick to, or we're going to do the reading test, or we're going to do, it wouldn't have worked.
Yeah.
Because we needed to talk about the issues that were in the classroom.
That's an awesome. That's really cool. Because there's not a lot of that, which I think is wrong. Like, it's mostly just traditional. And then when you do give the opportunity to students to talk about that, that's probably why I blew up, because it's not happening anywhere else.
Yeah. So you guys, you've been doing a similar sort of thing, because I saw in your blurb that you guys have been doing some stuff with bullying as well.
Mm-hmm.
So what's that about?
So we started the podcast together, the Shared Share podcast. And it's all in the attempt to elevate empathy within our school, because we share the belief that by elevating empathy, it's not getting rid of the bullying, but it's taking place of where the bullying is now.
Yeah, it's taking what we usually do, especially at the secondary level.
Mm-hmm.
At the elementary level, they focus on kindness.
Yes.
And this is how we behave.
Mm-hmm.
You start to get up into the secondary level, it's don't do this, and it's all the negative.
Yeah.
But you don't have then well, what is a positive culture look like?
Yeah, what should you do instead of not doing that?
Which we all assume is intuitive.
Yeah. It's not intuitive. Yeah. Yeah. So that was the angle today that we were going to approach is that it seems the current approach. I'm tempted to just move that right in here.
Can you?
Just so just so it's closer to the mic.
Yeah,
So I'll take it. Yeah. Okay, let's do that. Okay, sorry, Jen. We're thinking.
We were just talking about taking risks to go with the flow.
We're thinking on the fly.
Exactly.
But that was kind of the concept or the idea, the thought of the of our session today. Actually, was trying to think. So much of our energy is put on. Is put on. We're just going to move in here instead, and then we'll just get in the shot there, and we'll just make it more. We'll just make it more cozy.
Yeah. It's winter. It's cold.
That's awesome. So yeah, good. Okay. Cool.
Oh, I like that.
So
I'm stealing that for Monday.
So this comes good.
We want to spread that.
So this kind of comes from. So I'm gonna just, please, if you don't mind, just getting a little closer, and then I can get in the shot too.
Oh yeah.
Awesome. Thank you.
That.
Perfect. Cool. So we were coming from this angle of so many of us. Hi, yay, come on. Yeah, please.
Do.
It's become much more intimate. And,
well, I think it just not as many people came as they had registered.
Yeah, I think so too. So I'm just gonna adjust this. Sorry, viewers, you're moving around. So, are you okay to be on camera? Is this okay? Okay. So
hello. Who are we on camera for?
For anyone to watch and hear a conversation about empathy and how to address it, you know?
Oh, you'll say podcast live.
Yeah. I'm Dave. Hi.
I'm Kelsey, nice to meet you.
Kelsey, nice
I'm
to meet you.
Elise. Nice to meet you, Kelsey.
And you're an educator?
I'm Jen. I'm not, no. I'm a dietitian.
Terrific. That this morning, and to hear these people I trust and know and like are all saying how wonderful it was. So.
Really?
He's lying. He doesn't really like.
So,
No.
Cool.
Or just our school.
is it on Martha?
And we can even.
Some.
There we go.
There's one that I can't make because I'll be at a wedding. And it might be
That might.
Well, it will be.
Good. We can even make it a circle. So we were just saying we were kind of Elise and I were thinking on the fly about changing maybe the structure of this a little bit. And, so we were, but maybe we should explain what we're doing and who we are.
Yeah.
Especially, I mean, I think
Yeah.
we filled in Jen a little bit, but so I teach at a public high school just 30 minutes away from here, and the work these two know started with just personal interest on like paying attention to people, and I'm concerned about student cruelty. I'm concerned. I think that that when a student experiences that, then they can't fulfill themselves, even who they are. You know, it made me so concerned that I started like, okay, well, this isn't just my concern, but often those conversations happen angrily, right? So a student is bullied, so they're sad, they're hurt, they're crushed, and their parents get angry and come at the school or come at the person who bullied them, and maybe rightfully so, right? But all the conversation happens as a reaction and not in front of, you know? So it doesn't happen in a setting where we can kind of like really think together and stuff. So that a couple of years ago started this book club, community book club. We read Emily Bazelon's Sticks and Stones with a lot of the community, teachers, parents, all that. It was really interesting. That turned into a book, which Jen's a part of that book. It's a shared book on the topic. And then it was like, well, how does this work continue? And that's where it turned into this podcast. And I was like, but if I you know, a teacher only has so much power, right? Like in order to really do good work, it needs at least a student. So I pulled in one of the best. So I'll let you do a little introduction too.
Yeah, so I'm a student at the school he teaches at, Spring Lake. I'm a senior, and when he came to me with the idea of starting a podcast, my immediate thought, because we collaborated, what could we do to continue his elevating empathy endeavors, and we thought, podcast, that was his idea, and to interview the students at our school. And I was really immediately intrigued because I've been going to the same school my entire life.
Right.
And it's a small community, and so the same kids have been going to the school their entire lives, and I've known these people for 17 years, but I don't really know them. I know that, but I don't know anything about them. I don't know what makes them tick, what you often say, what makes them tick, and I wanted to, and I think that's wrong that I've been here for such a long time, and if I did know them, I feel like everything would be a little bit better. There would be less bullying, there would be more empathy, there would be more understanding and friendships more than just an acquaintance, and even worse so, a bully. And so when we started to do the interviews and getting to know the kids that I've known forever, it was amazing. It was really nice. And so I think that what our goal was to elevate empathy, and I think that's so far happening. And I think that I thought it was really good.
It's just one of those things. Once we started this podcast, where it's all of a sudden it's if I actually get to know you, even our podcast lasts. I mean, they're published 10 minutes, but the conversation's 20 minutes. Mm-hmm. Even in a 20-minute conversation, you leave going I could never be mean to that person. I could never. I mean, I kind of know you now, mm-hmm. Just in a 20-minute conversation. So it was fascinating. We've had some really great, interesting interviews. Did you want to mention just a couple of those, and then we'll move on?
Yeah, and it's also weird because I've known, like, since I've known these people such a long time, like, my previous judgment of who they were, what they were like, was often completely wrong, which doesn't say anything good about me as a person because I was, like, judging these people. But when you get, it goes to show that when you do get to know someone, it does change your, like, you can never be mean to them. It changes your perspective. And some of the people we've interviewed, the person who always first comes to mind is the first person we interviewed, which is Tyler Murek. He is like the football captain, and he's sort of the cliche, like high school guy. But he's not that. He's so nice. He likes finance. We talked about that. He loves to hike and like just getting to know someone. And also we interviewed Jen and her daughter. And just, do you have?
Those are
those are like the main ones that come to mind.
And on, you know.
Yeah.
Just like, just last week we had a student, Gabe, and Gabe goes to our alt ed school, and so he was talking about how that operates, kind of let shine some light on that. It's just a way to get to know people. It's pretty simple, really concept. So when we were thinking about coming in today, so thanks for being here, and now really we want to hear from you because so this is what we're doing. We're saying, like, my thought over a couple of years of study on this is that bullying is a communication, right? So it's a bridge between two people. It's just that the bridge is not one we like. It's kind of rotting, you know. So to use it as an analogy, it's because why do people bully, or why is cruelty? It's for either attention, or maybe for power, or I don't know, whatever.
Or they're lacking something that they want to fill.
Yeah.
That relationship.
And it's our belief when we were planning today to say, well, we can accomplish those things, giving attention, filling a soul or something, with a much better bridge, you know. But then that has to be created on something. Like, it has to be founded on something. Yeah. And we were kind of curious what that is. So we were thinking about, there's a great line from Rent, which is the opposite of war isn't peace, it's creation. So it's not the obvious opposite. So what we were wondering from you, and where we'd like to be quiet a little bit and wonder from you, is how you fill that blank in. Like, if the opposite of bullying isn't anti-bullying, it's what? Or is it anti-bullying? So that was kind of how we wanted to start our conversation today, is just to say, like, let's identify what's the opposite of bullying, or what the things are we want in our schools that are the opposite of bullying. I don't know if there's anything.
We were kind of talking about this before, but it's that we have so many conversations with little kids about, like, this is how we treat each other when we're kind, or these are the actions we do when we're frustrated. And it seems so trite to have, like, well, let's talk about what kindness is at the high school level. But here's the thing. I did that this year. We started out in our writer's notebooks with my 10th graders and also my journalism kids with the 26 acts, which was part of the remembrance for Sandy Hook. And every day we had, like, these are the actions we're going to do. And we built a larger conversation about what does kindness look like in our building. And again, it seems sort of silly, but at the same time, all of a sudden, when students had the opportunity, we created this huge wall outside of my room, which was just #kindnesses and, like, what does kindness look like?
Yeah.
The number of people that stopped to look at, my kids just took a note card, and kindness looks like giving your hairband to someone whose hairband just broke, which is so silly. Right? And it's so simple, or sharing your last Oreo cookie. We created this huge wall. The number of students that then walked by and were like, oh yeah, writing it up. Great, this is silly. But the conversation about what kindness looks like became a bigger part of our community.
Yeah.
And I think that's part of this. It's taking sort of the negative which we're always like, no bullying, anti-bullying,
Yeah.
which is important, but it's not there's nothing then to fill, like, what is it that we do want? What is our community about? What are our values? And having more of a focus on the values rather than the not.
Don't we know as educators that we need to be models of what we want and expect? So anti-bullying, I agree. Anti-bullying, I agree, is important. It's important in destructing that bridge, to continue with the analogy. And we do have to blow that thing up, right? That bridge, or do our best to make it not good. But it has to then be filled with something else.
Yeah.
So it's really difficult for me to try and think about that without thinking like being a sacrificial lamb or something in which you put yourself into a place where you're vulnerable because in front of others, especially in a situation where it's not a simulation or something like that, because you know very well that it could go completely wrong and it wouldn't set a good example. But I try to think about like the embodiment of that. What's the opposite of bullying? And I think back to last year when the Yik Yak app hit our high school, and yeah.
Explain it.
So Yik Yak is basically, it was created.
An anonymous Twitter.
Yeah, it's an anonymous Twitter. You go in, there's no accounts, you don't know who said something, but it's all based on your geolocation. It was originally created with the intention that people could use it to spread news about parties on college campuses.
Okay.
Hey, guess what? Down in South Quad, whatever, there's going to be a crazy party. And of course, immediately, teenagers started picking up on it and used it as a way to turn it into like a burn book and just totally trash each other because nobody knows. And even further complicating the matter is it might not even be someone in your community. It might be like in Matawan, we have kids that come from Paw, we have kids that come from Portage, we have kids come from Kalamazoo for other activities or just hang out and see their friends. It could be a kid coming from out of the community, coming in, dropping down all sorts of just sick stuff, and then and then leaving.
Yeah.
And so that hit us, and it's like, what? Oh my gosh, like what do we do? And everyone's like, all the adults are in a panic. But there's nothing we can do, right? We can't. They're using it on their phone. They're using it on their 3G. Nothing we can do. So a group of students, the second day of it, when we were trying to pull students in and do the typical adult thing, like, let's sit down and talk about how would this make you feel?
Yeah.
And they're like, oh, it made me feel terrible. And they just go right back to doing it. A group of students spent the evening writing up positive little notes, little sticky notes, things like something as simple as you matter, or you're loved, or you may not think so, but you're someone that matters. And they wrote all those little sticky notes, and they put them on every single locker in the high school. So when the kids came in the next day, there's all of these messages just completely surrounding them, handwritten, not like electronic text, but somebody took the time to do that. And you got 1,200 kids. That was a lot of time that they put into that.
Yeah.
And so at first, you went to the Yik Yak app, and people start trashing that. Like they think sticky notes are going to make a big deal or anything, right? But that encouraged enough students in the building to start fighting back on Yik Yak and going, no, they're trying to shut you up. They're trying to let you know that there's more of us here that care. And through that anonymity, they gain confidence to push back on the bullies. They gain that confidence saying, okay, maybe face to face, I don't feel confident to stand up to the bullies or to put myself out there as the sacrificial lamb and say, stop doing that. But they gained that confidence, and within a week, it got to the point where all the bullies were like, okay, this is stupid now. This is dumb. Don't want to mess with it. Because there was just this outpouring of this positive support. And I think that's what's so difficult, because it's not encapsulated in
Yeah,
one word.
you can't like put it on the screen. Like, that's a
Yes.
no, yeah.
Yeah, no,
It's a conversation.
it is it is a conversation for sure.
Yeah.
And that gets my some of the things what I was hearing from you, Ben, where I get my skin tingly, and mostly it's like, we know from a lot of research, a lot of reading, that the power of this, the power for change, is in the bystander, is in the people watching, and so we have to find ways to empower that population to act, and why don't they? It's by far the biggest population. I mean, I don't know, but that's the big group is the bystander. And so, but the fear of putting themselves out there, right, making it vulnerable, and then being the victim of cruelty or bullying or whatever. I think that's a really strong fear.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, this is where a student would be helpful. Like, why don't the bystanders speak? Maybe they need.
Well, so the Yik Yak thing, my school doesn't know about that. I hope we don't figure out about it. But instead of like no one, don't.
Too late.
Yeah.
Guys.
But instead of finding an app, they like our school. You might know about this. Like they made their own sort of app thing. They went on Twitter, and we don't know who did this.
Oh no, is this the polls?
Yeah, they made.
You guys did it too?
Everyone's done it.
I'm glad. That makes
Yeah.
me feel. To be honest, that makes me feel better because we're not like our students aren't so like crazy that we just like started that. I hope we didn't start that, but so just for the sake of if anyone's listening, they like created the Spring Lake polls, and there's definitely other schools that did it. And I don't know if yours are more insults, but ours are like
Vote for this person.
yes, and they're like super
They're
passive aggressive too.
Yeah.
It's like like I'm not saying any names, but like. Confident in themselves that they tweet like SL polls is stupid because they're obviously they're like their skin is thick enough where if people are going to get mad at them for tweeting that, they'll be okay. But there's only 2 or 3 of those kids out of 800 students at our school, which is wrong. And eventually the person who was doing this tweeted like, okay, I'm going to turn this into a compliments account.
Yeah. Exactly.
But you guys need to DM me the compliments for me to tweet them.
Nice.
And there were no DMs.
No.
The person who was doing it was like, to like keep this going, you guys actually have to give me compliments. And there'd be like every like one a day or for like 4 days or something. But eventually he's like, okay, you guys like we call them roasting, like roasting someone, I guess is what when it's mean. He's like, I'm going back to that, and it just went straight back to. So like it was okay that the students got so up in arms that they were like, okay, let's make this a compliment account, but then we didn't follow through with it. So how do we inspire kids to, first of all, not even have the idea of a roasting Twitter account to come into their brains, but have a compliment account or something more or less social media is like the sticky notes thing, which is that's awesome. Like how do we inspire kids to do that? What do we put out there to make them want to do the nicer thing instead of the mean one?
I think it starts like what you were talking about before with the conversation has to be happening in the classroom. Because I know like for me when we were doing this stuff at Crucible, the kids, I was doing my Crucible Union, who are the witches today, and we're going to write about the witches today and how we treat them, all this stuff. But we were reading some stuff on bystanders.
Yeah.
And then we were going to do a class discussion about like who are the bystanders and what is the psychological, deconstruct the article, and it became, I had 35 kids sitting in my room. We're all sitting on top of our desks, circled up. No, I need to talk about, like, this is my experience in the hallway. And I had to back up and go, like, all right, we're going to have these conversations, put some ground rules in place, but those conversations are so much more valuable as a community building piece that then when we go back in and later had to do the academic stuff, it was much more of a valuable thing. Right. So we get stuck, I think, sometimes as teachers wanting to do the curriculum and wanting to do the content and wanting to do the skills, that we forget that the soft skills, the ones that aren't tested, if we don't do those first, we don't have conversations like you're doing with the podcast about who are the people that are sitting in the room and what are their stories, and can I put myself in their shoes for a bit? If we don't have those conversations, then we're not doing anything with content anyways.
Yeah.
Like, it's not, if you don't have your heart, you don't have the heart, you don't have their head. Like, we need to have those, I think, conversations about what does bullying look like? What are the things that are happening in our community? What do we want it to look like? And then how do we do that? And make that a part of the daily community in the classroom.
So you're talking about curricular change, right? Or that this is a really systemic, this is important to us, really identifying it as, because right now all of our movements, let me make sure I'm phrasing this the right way so I'm looking at you. All of our movements for kindness are extracurricular, right?
Yeah.
Like Be Nice is a group, sort of, if you want to join it. Our podcast only runs like after school. It's not part of school.
But then the kids that already know the message.
And
who are part of that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So then how do you have to bring it, I think, into the class
Yeah.
so that the community builds it.
And then it's something that's worth being in the classroom, because I think the message that it sort of unconsciously sends to kids when it's not in the classroom is that it's not worth their time.
Or it's only worth their time
Afterwards.
Yeah.
And I think it's really hard because I'm in a district that, our test scores matter. We're on all sorts of lists and things.
Your
And
priorities.
and so we get tested to death, and so we get focused on the test scores. And it's the same thing, I think, that happens with us as teachers. Like, we start to lose empathy and connection with ourselves as colleagues because we're seeing each other as numbers, and we see kids as numbers. And we see kids as like, well, you have this percentage. And the conversations really have to, I think, come back into. But it's hard because it's not something right now that I think is valued by the culture.
Mm-hmm.
It's the soft skill that,
Yeah.
Then what?
I'm there. Because that's really what it comes down to, is what you're talking about, these teachers, is I'm not going to fault anyone for saying, I don't feel secure enough putting myself out there as a teacher in my classroom, because we all have insecurities. So it's really that leader to say, I'm going to put myself out there. Take that away from you, that burden, that not necessarily shame, but that feeling of I couldn't possibly do this. To say I'm going to do this, and I'm going to support you, and we're going to open up the conversation to the community to let them understand that this is important. And sometimes that goes all the way up to like the school board level to say, look, this is something we value, and we want you to really be a part of this conversation with us, because otherwise it just happens in these tiny little islands.
Yeah.
And it's great for those students in that environment, but then they just go right back into the sea of everything else.
So 3 years ago, when we did the community book club, that was there was a small group kind of doing the legwork, but that was an accepted thing from leadership. It was incredible. We had good conversations. We did
every semester a new book.
We did great. We did really great work, but the sustainability is a challenge because it just didn't stay, at that level, But that moment was good. This fall, I got an email that just said, well, looks like and this was disheartening, of course, but that said something like something to the effect of, well, it looks like the work that you put in a couple years ago wasn't too effective. This is what's happened to my own child, or whatever, something like that, which is, I'm willing to field that. I mean, that's important. I think that's okay to recognize. There are times where I want to recognize, like, the fight against anti-bullying, like, it will never go away, right?
Right.
So like we really need to
Yeah.
start with this sort of knowledge that it's never going to go away. That's sort of like, but it's about minimizing it and building another, like, what are the things that the people who are being mean are trying to get? Can we create spaces where they can get that feeling through a different source or way, or can the power of the bystander sort of just like minimize the effectiveness of the and I think you're right, Jen, and Ben too, that this becomes it needs to be systemic, or needs to be part of the of culture constantly, like never ending, like not a single movement, not just a term long thing, but repeated over time.
Yeah.
Got a group of students at our high school. Thankfully, we're isolated, but large enough, consolidated enough that we're able to bring in resources. And so we've got a social worker in every building. And at the high school, our social worker leads the PALs, peers as leader students or whatever. And so it's now I'll say it's more than nice. It feels good that we're able to support that program and have these students in the building. They actually have their own room, and they have a couple little like therapy booths. Like you go in there and they will conference with students about that. And they came to me a week just before Christmas break asking, hey, we want to start spreading news about this sort of thing out there, because we want to encourage more high schools to do that. And it's just one of those things where I get a feeling there must be groups like that in other schools, and if there's a way to connect them and build like what you guys did today, it was fantastic, and an excellent pointed question about what are you doing to get down to Southeast Detroit, right? I'm sure there are plenty of groups in Detroit doing what you're doing, maybe not the same exact way, but is there some vehicle to help connect them and show that there's strength out there that you're just not aware of?
So would you mind, Ben, sharing a little more about PALS, the peer-assisted leadership?
Yeah.
Because this is sort of the next part that we wanted to focus on, and actually some of it's already come up already, sticky notes, boards outside your classroom with maybe different hashtags. But it's like once we identify what we want the bridge so then how do we develop kindness? How do we develop, like, what are the action plans to get more student leadership? So this PALS program, I actually know about this. I was 20 plus years ago, was a PAL.
Yeah.
So this has been, but we've since done away with PALS. I mean, that was even just a few years after it was implemented. Come on in, come on in. I'm gonna make sure we get you. But so maybe like for anyone who's listening, and for people, because we're gonna post this then later too, make it part of our podcast, is to like this might be a really beneficial thing to understand what PALS is, sort of when we think about action plans and things like that. So
I had to pull up the website to get their overview and everything, because in my job sometimes I'm working across the district, so I get small glimpses of what's happening. But yeah, it's run by our social worker and the students in the program. I love it. What is the purpose of the PALS program? And right on the website, it's confidence building, and reaching out to students. But it's also about having that confidentiality, when they work with students, to help them build up that confidence in private. Right? Because you don't want to put yourself out there in high school because you're a teenager, and if you put yourself out there, then someone's just waiting to knock you down, right? And they focus on all of those issues, like abuse and neglect, and at home or at school, bullying, all of that, but they do that it's I don't want to call it therapy, right? But it's counseling.
Yeah.
Is what it is.
From a teenager.
Yeah, and they're all trained how to be effective listeners.
Yeah.
And counseling, and if you're aware of like cognitive coaching, there's an element of that paraphrasing of being able to just let someone talk and be able to reflect their words back to them in a way that they feel someone's just listening to them.
Mm-hmm.
And just through that simple act, people become more confident in I do have a role in, or I do have a say in how I live my life and how others affect me. It's not just I go out in the world and I'm a blank slate and people dump all their crap on me, and so I'm terrible.
Yeah.
But no, you've got empowerment to write on that board as well.
Is this does this happen every day? Is it like between classes or during classes that they meet?
The PALS class actually meets the PALS group meets every day.
Okay.
They work internally, and they do a lot of activities and everything to prepare themselves for counseling. But then any student at any time can go and talk to one of them. They can go down to a counselor and say, I need a session with a PAL. They've got an anonymous little box where you can leave notes, emails, things like that.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of methods, and the building is supportive of that, and so they acknowledge that. If a student is to the point where they're like, I need to go talk to a PAL, the teachers are like, go.
Yeah, the teacher. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Because there's that support from the building leadership.
Yeah.
It's not, well, do you really need to go talk to a PAL right now? Because I think you're okay. No. It's if a student gets to that point, then yes, it has to happen.
And that's good because just like there's always those few amazing classes like yours and a lot of yours where
Take the compliment.
You're an amazing teacher there, Ward.
Yes.
where like you face those problems and everything and you talk openly, but then you, like you said, you go right back into the hallways, into the other classes where it's as if it doesn't matter, as if they don't care about it. And that's like actual science where there's only so much that you can remember for a short amount of time, and then you forget about it and go straight back to how it was. But then the everyday thing, the consistency, where it's showing like we do care and we're here. That's when I think change starts to happen.
And it's empowering too that it's the peer-to-peer piece.
Yeah.
Like it's not a teacher saying this is what we should do or this is what, it's that peer-to-peer piece that I think is really important.
Is it high school?
One thing that we do in the classroom is that we start every day, and we're only there once a week, but I think it could also be applicable to an everyday classroom. So I don't know if we have like homeroom or anything of that, like, or even just first hour, hour. Every classroom in first hour does this, where we do like highs and lows. And we have time, because it's once a week, we have time to devote like 15 minutes to everyone sharing theirs. But on a day-to-day basis, what if it was like the same, like, okay, so 5 students go on Monday, 5 on Tuesday, like this, and they know their day. So for students that have like social anxiety, or they know their day ahead of time, so they can prepare like, well, what has been, my high this week, what has been my low this week. But what that does is all the other students all of a sudden are listening. They're saying, oh, I didn't know your dad was in the hospital.
Yeah.
Oh, I had no idea you lived with your aunt and uncle because of that. Oh, I had no idea that your dad just got out of jail and that's affecting your life and that's affecting your emotions.
Yeah.
I had no idea that because you were sick last week, you missed a test day and that's like really stressful to you. And so all of a sudden they're listening to each other. And that would only take, if one person, every person has a minute, 5 people later, it's 5 minutes. It's not long.
Yeah.
It's really
But it's enough, and it's regular, that it's not like, okay, we're going to do this one great thing. It's, and so for us, for what we've seen is that the students care about each other, and they remember. They remember from week to week. Like, we're diatribes only in the school that we do this in once a week, but they remember from week to week, like, what happened or what they shared last week, and they check in. Oh, how's that going? Like, oh, how's your grandma doing? All that kind of stuff.
When I hear you say that, I don't think it's only helpful for peers to hear that. There are it would be helpful for
Right, for me
teachers.
too.
Yeah.
And these are things that,
Yeah.
that we often don't know.
Yeah.
You know, if a parent is just getting out of jail, if the child, for whatever reasons, living with an aunt and uncle, if the child is just stressed because of a missed test from a week ago and it went in as a 0, and look, I don't. I mean,
Yeah.
maybe I won't speak for others. I don't know those things.
Yeah.
I mean, unless it happens after class in an exchange or
Right.
before class, where hey, you look, where I might try to be aware of how a student's looking or something and say, hey, are you okay? But if I don't do that, or if the student's not bold enough, which is scary and hard, and so I don't blame the students for that. But there's no space for that.
Mhm.
I wouldn't know that.
Mhm.
And every student has a high and a low.
Yes.
And I think that's like, and whatever that low is, it's low. It doesn't matter how strong. I mean, how maybe serious it might seem to an outside person. If it's a stressor, it's a stressor, right? Oh, God, I love that. Yeah. Huh. Simple.
Right, very simple, but very like intentional, and because it's regular, it's effective.
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't know what that would look like I said, like every first hour or something. Like it's just an agreement for the whole school, like kind of like, I don't know, schools have announcements at a certain time of day, like this certain time of day you're gonna spend like 5 minutes, and yeah, it's gonna eat a little bit of whatever class period that is, but like the productivity of the rest of the hour will probably be a lot better.
Yeah.
And the students will all of a sudden connect with people that they're normally like, not really like
Yeah.
you don't
It
Yeah.
gets to what you guys are doing with this podcast.
Yeah.
That getting
That's the
to know
idea.
the story.
Yeah, it's like that, like boiled down.
It's like they're not all of a sudden just a person that you could possibly make yourself feel better by being mean to, but they have like
Mhm.
they have a life. Like there's stuff going on that maybe you can connect to, that maybe you can help them with, and I think that gives other students a sense of purpose as well as friendship among everyone. That just increases not only productivity but just like overall happiness around the school.
I'm curious about this. I want to push back a little bit.
Sure.
So do you know of then, how is it created, the community created, that when a student shares a load, that's not then attacked
we
later?
have some rules of like you can't share names of like someone who was like someone else is affected, like, oh, I got in a fight with whoever, but you can't say like that other person's name. It shouldn't be time for gossip. You say I fight with a friend. But then also, I mean, it took a long time for them to share the deeper things.
Of
But
course.
we got there. Like we got there in maybe 3 months. You know.
Yes.
And that's worth it, I think.
Yes.
And so initially it's just oh, you know, we have math test this afternoon, oh, whatever, da, da. But then eventually it gets to that, like, my dad's in the hospital, and, like, that's why you see me crying in the halls. Like,
Mhm.
you know, it gets there.
How big, only because the action plan part of this is so important to me that we need to not just talk, but we need to act. How many students per adult or per?
At our Grand Rapids, how
many students are sharing in a circle or in a?
It's the whole classroom. We do the whole
So
classroom.
however many are in a classroom,
Yeah,
so 30 or
we just kind of like
whatever.
circle up, or like everybody like kind of turn your seats a little bit. And the most we've done it with is, I mean, it takes like half hour because we do every single person. Like I said, we've got like 5 people a day.
Right.
We've done a whole classroom of 25 to 30 kids at Grand Rapids Public. So and it works, and they listen, and you know, even the students who are the ones that are bullied, like, you know, they share something, and it's, like I said, if they know the day they're going on, it helps a lot.
Yes.
Prepare ahead of time.
Is each class doing this at the same time but just in different classrooms, or is there only like one classroom?
We're only in one classroom.
Okay.
I'm suggesting in a district because you said like it has to. But like you got really close. Like our seminars were based on last names, and so like it wasn't students that you necessarily, like, it wasn't grade, it wasn't anything like that,
Right.
like GPA or anything. It was like the students that were like sharing your last name in the alphabetical order.
Yeah.
So it was very random. But like I was just talking to somebody last week about, we're reflecting on high school. Like yeah, they were in my seminar, like all these people that you wouldn't even expect you to be friends with, but because you're with each other every other day, every year, yeah, it was the same actually every year. That was nice too. Like you had the same for all 4 years. Then you were like you built relationships with these people because it wasn't necessarily like a class time. It wasn't a learning time. It was like you're doing your homework or you're asking for help from another student who's good at that subject. Just an interactive time. And so in the same way, if it's consistent with the same students all year long, like it grows you closer together. You're like you remember from week to week. Oh yeah, like how are they doing? I'm not normally friends with them, but I remember they shared that last week. How are they doing with it?
Right. We all agree that that it's hard to fill in that blank on the board where the opposite of bullying is an anti-bullying. It's blank. But if I had to with a single word, I'd probably use empathy because that's been but it's relationships.
Yeah.
And so
Connection.
how do we, it's connection.
Like genuine, authentic connection.
Right. and then students can feel free to reach potential.
Like you said, because then, oh my gosh, your older brother just got in trouble and it's stressing you out because he was your best friend. Oh, I can no longer be mean to you. I can no longer tease you.
Yeah, because I could tease you about
why are you looking so tired? Why
looking
do you
so
smell
tired,
funny
or
today?
getting a bad grade, or sitting off by yourself at lunch. I can be mean to you about that, but I can't be mean to you about you
the reason behind it. Like
your
why
brother. Yes. Yeah.
And the intentionality is key because we've all been part of enough schools or organizations where there's something that happens and no one really knows why. It's just this is just the ritual. We just do this, and that makes it easy when there's budget cuts or when something else pops up. It's like, oh well, we can't do seminar anymore.
Yeah.
Sorry, because maybe most people in seminar they turned it into a study hall or a time when I gotta take care of my emails to do this or whatever the case is. But if the intention is there, even something as simple as at the beginning of every, I'm sure you do this, at the beginning of every session or seminar or whatever, we are here because we are focusing on this. Even if it's the same sentence, we're the same mission, and I've really been learning more about that. At one point in time, I always thought mission statements, okay, yeah, it's really silly, and we create them, and then do we ever really talk about them? But if you take the time to craft that intention, craft that mission together, and reflect on it, and you bookend, like something as simple as we're here today because we realize that we're all vulnerable and we need help. Just something as simple as that. That means as new people come in, they immediately, oh, okay, I understand why we're here. As new administration comes in, they don't have that easy, why the heck are you doing this? Like we didn't do stuff like this why the heck? Oh, it's the mission statement's right there, or the script that we use to kick things off. It's right there. So regardless of whoever comes later, administrative or students, or who's going to facilitate it, because people are always going to come in and go, why the heck are you doing this? At least everybody can point back to, well, this is the mission that we had. So when you question, is this even valuable anymore? You have that reflection piece to go back to. Not just, is this valuable? Oh, I don't know. Why are we doing it?
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
And when you say, when that happens, when the empathy increases and we all our relationships are stronger, then you can reach your full potential. That's another reason why we're doing this, because I see it in my younger sister who's a freshman, and she wants to start clubs and she wants to do things to help this or other sorts of things. But she can't because she's afraid of what people will say or how people will react, and that's going to be a negative reaction. Not like, oh, I'm afraid they're going to like it. Like, I'm afraid they're going to be nasty to me. But by doing that, you can reach your full potential because you don't have to be afraid of what people are going to say, because what they're going to say is encouraging things. So things like that need to be in place. But how do we?
Question. So this is kind of brought up earlier. teachers are gonna just blow it off. So how do you create a culture? Because I really think it's a culture piece to get the reluctant teachers on board who are gonna go like, "Ah, it's just cheesy, just a waste of time."
And I look at that, because I like to solve problems, I look at that as someone who's involved with curriculum as like, well, that's a PD issue, right? If I have teachers, if it's writing, we want to push writing across the curriculum, and teachers are like, the science teachers and math teachers are like, wait, how are we doing this? Okay, let me go find some PD, or find some support, like the diatribe, right? Maybe it's,
If I had to experience it.
maybe you bring somebody in to facilitate that for those teachers.
In a very similar way that we're trying to do it with students, I think we have to do that same sort of intentionality with the teachers as well. The district that I'm in right now, and I kind of blew it off when I first started it, we do something called Capturing Kids' Hearts, which is a whole program. And so like we've all had to go through the training. I thought it was cheesy. It's so not cheesy. Because it's just that, like we had to do the work ourselves first as teachers and talk about like where our values lie. So like when we go into the classroom at the start of every semester, we do social contracts with the kids. And what are the values of this classroom? What are the words that stand out? So we can all sign it.
Wait, you work here?
No, I don't.
Oh,
I mean,
on the doors here.
yeah, but there is, like, we have to do our own as a teaching staff. And, like, I hadn't gone through the training. I'm like, this is my first day, first district that, you know, coming into. And why are we doing this thing with the words? And how do I want to be treated? Like, it didn't mean anything until I had that experience with a group of teachers and went through, like, the training piece and had the conversations about how we treat one another and what our values are. Like, that was an important piece. So, like, even as a teaching community, having the same conversations that we then have later on with students, too.
And I think just like students eventually will, I don't want to, conformity can have negative connotations.
But look forward to it or expect it.
Exactly. Just like students can conform to that. If you have a strong leader that, hey, if once a month when we get together, I'm going to ask this question. You know, okay, how are you doing on the social contracts? Eventually, you're going to get that peer pressure among the teachers, and you're going to have fewer and fewer teachers, because if the expectation is that everyone's going to go around and share and talk about that, then eventually you're that one teacher that's like, crap, I didn't get on board.
And if the students are talking to each other like, oh hey, how was your like highs and lows sharing today? Like what did you share? Like especially friends would want to know like, hey, what did you share in highs and lows today? And then they're like, oh well, my teacher doesn't really care to do it. It's like, well they should, you know. Like the students would start to be like, well they should. It's helpful. And like when a yik yak thing happens, all of a sudden, what's your high and low? Well, my low is people are talking about me on yik yak, and that's not cool. And then the people are like, yeah, I actually saw that post. I didn't think it was true. Like people are going to respond to that. You know what I mean?
In those high-lows, do people respond? Do you allow time for response, or is it only like, here's my high, here's my low?
Kind of time it.
Next
so, like,
person.
We'll cut it off, and we actually. This is what we were saying. I don't think we explained it very well. But we've started making it student-led, and so we don't even lead highs and lows anymore.
Yeah, okay.
We have a leader for every day, a different leader every day. And they like they're responsible for time, and they're responsible for like figuring out when it's getting off track or when it's helpful questions.
So you allow a little question time after.
Especially if it's like, oh, I applied for a job, then the students are like, well, what job?
Yeah,
like,
where?
They want to know,
Yeah.
like that's kind of important.
Yeah, right. So I'm hearing some, over the course of the conversation, like the highs, lows is really interesting. The sticky notes, the pals, the boards outside the classroom. These are really good action items, but also in terms of trying to be a good listener, I'm also hearing it really needs to be systemic. It needs to be
to affect every student.
To affect.
To not just affect the students who are going to show up to after school programs.
Yeah.
If you're one of the teachers who's not doing this, I think the message is you don't care.
That's what it comes down to.
Yeah.
Even if you don't mean it to be.
Yeah.
And then in my experience, when teachers, like if this isn't a mandatory thing in our school, so then when there are a few teachers who do stuff like this, I get really tipped off at the other teachers who don't. It's true, like you don't, like, because there's 2 or 3 teachers who do this on their own time. They're not taking away time from learning or anything. And this helps us learn and collaborate with other students.
Yeah.
And then, like the other classes, you can see the difference in the productivity and the efficiency. And like how comfortable we are speaking up. And yeah.
So that's good perspective for me to have, because sometimes if I go down that road in a classroom, I'm always a little concerned, like, oh, are other teachers looking at me as, wow, he's not being productive today.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know what I mean? Like, all of a sudden I'm starting, oh boy, is this a valuable half an hour? And of course it is. But my own insecurities,
Right,
my
like,
own
you have a job,
vulnerabilities,
you're not
like,
do that necessarily.
yeah, like,
So I think we already touched on this a little bit. What you're getting at then is, okay, if you're going to be serious and committed to this as a district, then you're going to have an opportunity for your teachers to get together and do that with them as well. And say, once a month, we're going to get together and we're going to do
like check-ins, yeah.
Highs and
like
lows,
check-ins.
right?
Oh, we're going to do the same thing. You guys do this with your students, and we're going to do it as a staff right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
Beginning
really,
of every staff meeting.
Yeah.
in high school.
Yeah, I think
that-
high schoolers
I don't
and
see why
students
not.
really appreciate that when the people that they look up to are willing to take the time to do what they're making us do anyway. Because like we have to do homework, we have to do what they're telling us to do, and so why shouldn't you have to necessarily, like, there's to a certain extent. But I think that students would really appreciate if we do the same thing.
Especially if you have a problem, you can't focus on your class anyway.
right.
So what good is it?
Right. You're right. And the only way to bring that focus is to, one, maybe let it be known, but two, to get support, right? And be like, now we can think about you, right? We can send you our positive thoughts or our vibes or our prayers, whatever students do to lift that person up. Incredible. I know our time is almost up. We're down to just a few minutes, and I guess Lisa and I wanted to send an invitation to you to say, like, that this. So our podcast currently. Whoops.
Yeah.
Our podcast currently is our bridge. So this is our way of trying to have an action plan. And that so these are the different ways that you can be aware of our podcast, but also, and it's not a big enough group to be like, so I'll just say it on a much more low key. But if you want in, or if you know, guys, I know you work district-wide, so Ben, if you know a teacher who would want to do something like this, we'd be happy to, like, one of our visions is to start expanding this. So we publish an episode on a Monday, but to get other schools into our podcast, that we publish on like a Wednesday or something, that would be amazing to see if the experiences among high schoolers in different districts, so Jen, you too, if either you or I know you do so much for your school, but another teacher or students or whatever the case may be, we're happy to house these. We have a house for it. You know what I mean? We have a place for it. All we need are MP3 files with interviews, and then we can publish it and push it out. And so that is an invitation. A real invitation to say, if you know, or people in neighboring districts, or but that's something we're looking for, or inviting people.
Yeah.
I mean, to say, if you want in on this bridge, we'd welcome that. So
I'm going to share this with all the teachers in my district this week for my weekly connection. I do a weekly connections and collaborations through technology, trying to bridge curriculum and technology.
Yeah.
And I share a couple resources each week, so not to completely inundate them. But I'm going to share this. Would you be comfortable getting responses from elementary as well?
oh yeah, I think that would be great.
Yeah, that'd be interesting.
That'd be interesting
Yeah.
to see
Definitely
what that would be. Yeah,
a new-
that'd be great.
Yeah, it's really fresh. Yeah.
Cool. All right.
So thanks for sharing that, and just give them, give them my email, and then we can collaborate and talk and go from there. And
Sounds good.
so yeah, we're trying to say, like, we're even thinking of. I mean, we're just a few months into this, but we're like, well, how else can we? So our neighboring district, wouldn't it? Even our neighboring district, wouldn't it be interesting to see if they're so much bigger than we are? How are the issues different or the same? How are that'd be fascinating to start to get more voices in the podcast. So that's kind of where we wanted to end today.
Yeah. And if you want, there's sticky notes back there if you want to put your emails on them.
Yeah.
Just to like get like notified when there's a new episode, and also like collaborative endeavors and stuff.
Yeah. So, but thanks, and I don't know, are there?
Told you.
But I'm walking away. Maybe we do have 5 minutes or so. So I don't know. I'm walking away with ideas and thoughts and action plans, because that's always my fear is like, oh, empathy, oh, empathy, oh, kindness. There's such good ideas, but no ways to really like
What's the follow-up?
create.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Like actions
for-
are larger than.
Yeah, and so
I'm so doing
highs and lows is
Yeah,
amazing.
that's a really.
Yeah.
Have a pals
They're
or peer
purely-
listening.
yeah.
At Grand Valley, we have that. Like,
Yeah.
and this is like college, you know what I mean? So like it just exists.
not
So
hard
if you need to convince somebody, like it wouldn't be hard to find like other places.
Who could talk about their involvement in
Yeah.
PALS and
Yeah.
what that's like?
You
Yeah.
probably can go on the national website, like type in your zip code or something.
Yes.
You probably
Yep.
could and figure out where.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
probably have like.
I have a question, because we always start class with good news, and that's from Capturing Kids' Hearts, because I had the same stuff. But I'm just thinking about the difference between, because it's focused on the positive, but it doesn't always allow kids to share the pain.
Well, then that's what you have to do to be able to destroy that first bridge.
Yes.
The bully's not going to care if you're having a great weekend because you had this awesome play that you were in.
Mm-hmm.
Like, the bully's going to care if all of a sudden you're sharing, like, oh, and your dad couldn't make it because they had to work late.
Mhm.
Like, oh, that sucks. And if they hear it every week, why am I giving this kid a hard time? Like, he has a stressed out home life. You know what I mean? It just, like, they'll police themselves.
Eventually.
Yeah.
It just takes consistency.
It's consistency, systemic
Yeah.
and consistent. I love it.
I'm not saying that it doesn't work as well.
No, it's just making me
we
think.
do that for
I'm just
we do it for
Well,
a reason.
Because kids will share negative stuff, they're like,
Yeah.
but this isn't really good news, but, you know, so they'll still share it, so they need to, right?
Yeah.
We have the good news in one of our classrooms, and like our teacher has to like beg us to say good stuff. Like I think like there's like 30 kids in the classroom, and 2 or 3 kids each time will raise their hand, and then she's like, no one else has anything good to say. It's like, well,
Is it first hour?
That's
no,
voluntary.
it's like after
Yeah.
lunch.
It's-
We've had like good lunches, and like you could at least say like, oh, I like, yeah, like it's like not too early. It's
But that is
It's a
the
good
difference
time.
between voluntary as well.
Yeah.
If it's just like, you're going to do this, so be ready, and you know, here's
and like
your
giving them the
days.
notice that your day is coming, like
Yeah.
you said. Yeah, that's a good too.
Awesome. Well, thanks for joining the session.
Yeah,
And,
thanks so much.
That's awesome, really. And you know, you all do good, such good work as it is. So keep doing the good work. And all right, cool. Thanks.
Cool, man. Thanks a lot.
Appreciate it.
It's your semester. Yeah.
I'm a writing teacher.
I
So
see.
y'all are.
Yeah, it looks like you're doing
Mad
amazing
one
stuff.
has the writing teacher.